All right, on this episode of Bare Knuckle Bowker, very excited to be talking to an individual heading into Gamebred Bare Knuckle MMA, which goes down on November the 15th. And a very intriguing fight set to go down with David Zelner taking on Mike Sanford. And great getting to have Mike on Bare Knuckle Bowker. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing great, man. I guess like one of the first things I noticed with this fight, and I mean, I guess not uncommon all throughout your career. I feel like this has happened a fair bit, but just like an opponent switch, I noticed you were supposed to fight Jeff Denton. Is it kind of just like normative kind of fair for you at this point? Like you just say, well, whatever, this tends to happen. I'll just kind of adapt and do my own thing and whatnot.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think every fight I've had has had a replacement. And most of them are like last minute. Like my last Gamebred fight, um, my opponent, I think they said he got arrested or something like that on weigh-in day. And they had like five backup guys they offered me. And I went one after another. And then I ended up going with the last guy on the list. So, it's definitely happened to me quite a bit.
Yeah, I did actually notice that because when we had spoken ahead of that Gamebred Bare Knuckle MMA fight, it was you were supposed to fight Christopher Wingate, which I guess he was the individual that happened to, and then I saw he ended up fighting Alex Gordy. But I guess in any event, good to see that they were able to get you locked in with a fight because it also seemed like there were some other instances from what I was gleaning where unfortunately a replacement opponent couldn't come about. And I mean, it seems like you take it in stride and everything, but just I would think it would be great to, salvage the opportunity and get to, actually get out there and compete for what you've prepared for and all.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely challenges that come with that, like psychologically, one of the big things I think is like that I have a lot of experience with mixed martial arts for a guy with as few fights as I've had. So now I've got six pro fights, so it's a little bit easier to like find people that are comfortable fighting me at that level. But when I've only had like a couple pro fights, I've been coaching for years, and it wasn't really, it was hard to find somebody that was willing to fight me that was also at that level of eligibility as far as like the commissions go. So it's getting a little bit easier now.
Yeah, like just as you get more experience, the opportunities are in greater abundance because I mean that does seem to be the case from what I've noticed because you've coached and been involved as a martial artist for many years. Like your MMA experience kind of belies like the overall experience you seem to have.
Yeah, for sure. And like well, like for example, one of the guys that I wanted to fight in Gamebred, he's got like 20 fights. And Dean almost put it together this time, but he kind of wants me to get, more guy. He doesn't want it to look like there's a mismatch on there. If something like, doesn't go fly, 'cause, bare knuckle is new. So I think like for me to be able to fight these guys with 20 fights, I have to go through the rankings here a little bit. And it's tough. It's tough for motivation sometimes. I try my hardest to like take everybody super serious. But I've definitely been guilty of under preparing in some cases, especially when like everything's getting changed, you don't know what's gonna happen. I'm old and I'm kind of naturally lazy. So it's really easy for me to put things on the back burner sometimes. That's a mentality I've had to like change and embrace, especially recently. So I'm taking everybody super serious. But this opponent, I have a lot of respect for. He's got a lot of fights. He's coming from a really good camp. He's young, like he's hungry. He's younger than I am anyway. And he's got a lot of good wins. He's got a lot of experience in the cage, and that's easier for me to take serious and train hard for. So I'm definitely excited about this next one.
Yeah, because I mean, even kind of, going through his record here, it seems like he's gotten some pretty big looks, whether it's like promotions wise or even with opponents. Like I saw he fought Abdullah Al Khatani in PFL, and he seems like he's doing great on that PFL
Yeah.
MENA circuit and whatnot. And also, I guess, referencing Christopher Wingate, I noticed that he fought him in MMA. But yeah, it seems like he has a good amount of experience and whatnot. But I guess I'm curious because, I mean, a marginal advantage to a certain sense, but just the fact that you've already gotten in there for bare knuckle MMA, like, do you think that's going to provide you some sort of discernible advantage, at least in as far as like the anecdotal experience and familiarity with fighting in MMA without the gloves?
Possibly, I think it depends on the athlete quite a bit. But I've seen the way he fights. I don't think it's going to be a huge impact on him. He's fought through adversity quite a few times in his career. like the big is when you're getting hit with bare knuckles, when you're throwing with bare knuckles, it is different. You're not throwing the same way you can with gloves. Especially if you like wear wraps. So I never wrap my hands. So it's like, I wear the lightest gloves possible and I never wrap my hands. I like to feel everything. And a lot of guys aren't used to that. If you're used to just putting on wraps and making your hand into like a steel cast and just doing whatever you want with it and not feeling anything, it's going to be different. You're going to hurt your hands like after a few punches. And if you're not used to that feeling and you don't know how to work around it, it can throw your game off. Also, when you get hit, it's a lot easier to get cut. It feels different. It's not like, it's not like you don't usually feel pain during the fight. You can sometimes, but it's it's a different feel when you get hit with a glove and when you get hit with bare knuckles. That's for sure.
And it's interesting because I have noticed that in some different posts that you've had. It's almost like you were kind of preparing for bare knuckle before it became a regulated sort of growing thing and whatnot. Like even back in the day, like seemed like you would, train in a certain regard where it's like you're like putting some padding over a tree and kind of, just going at it and stuff like that. So it's almost like the hands have been galvanized and you're doing a lot of those like hand strengthening kind of techniques before that, I guess, kind of became part of the discourse that we, experience nowadays with bare knuckle in different forms.
Yeah, I do. I do believe in that to a degree. I don't do it like the old school Asian masters, used to preach. They would like deform their hands, and you couldn't do like regular stuff with their hands, right? But I do believe in getting your hands used to hitting things that are a little bit more stiff but mobile, and looking to aim for targets a little bit more actively, especially moving targets. It can be difficult sometimes. So I do a lot of training in that regard, and I do hit the bag barehanded a lot. I almost never wear wraps. I wear wraps if I'm injured. That's the way I see it. Like wraps are supports. They're like band-aids. They're literally crutches. And if you walk around with crutches all the time, you're going to weaken yourself to a degree, right? So I believe in using wraps sparingly. So if my hands hurt or if I injured my hand in some way someday, I will wear wraps. And in all honesty, all the hand injuries I've had have been, from usually the gloves I'm wearing. Like when I'm blocking a kick, maybe the muffin top style, like, the big puffy gloves or whatever, they come over the front knuckles here. And it's good because it stops a lot of cuts and injuries from punches. But like when you go to parry a kick, if they get your fingertips, they're going to break your finger over the edge of the glove. That's happened to me a couple times. And that's when I need to wear wraps and stuff. But I've never actually had any injuries to my hands in a fight. And I'm not slugging out there like Justin Gaethje, but I think that there's something to that. A lot of my guys too. Some of my guys do slug like Justin Gaethje, and the only injuries that we've had, like serious injuries to hands, have been in gloved fights where they had their hands wrapped.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would think this is I mean, it is especially the case in, bare knuckle MMA, but even with just, bare knuckle boxing, like a slightly more limited kind of rule set, it seems like guys that come from a jiu-jitsu background can cross over really well. And it's sort of interesting because obviously, like, the strikes are not a component within jiu-jitsu, but like maybe there's something to like the competitive familiarity of being in a gloveless martial art and engaging in a competitive back and forth with someone. Like it's interesting because I noticed that with Jim Allers, like when he was in MMA, because he didn't necessarily have like the highest, I guess, percentage of finishing people with strikes in his fights, but when he came over to bare knuckle, he was like just really putting it on guys and getting those finishes. It's kind of interesting. I guess I'd be curious to, get your perspectives because it seems like a certain amount of jiu-jitsu players can cross over well into different bare knuckle disciplines, whether it's boxing or MMA.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I can't really speak for everybody. Jim Mallers is a beast. I got a lot of respect for that guy, and he transitioned over into bare knuckle boxing really well. He had a really good fight with one of my guys in the UFC back in the day, and he's just a savage all around. And I think possibly like the jiu-jitsu training could have something to do with it, but I think it's more like I think Jim teaches jiu-jitsu also, and I think a lot of jiu-jitsu instructors like myself, that do this for a living, most people that come to us don't come to us because they want to win an IBJJF title, especially if they come to like more of an MMA style gym. They do it because they want to learn how to fight. And, a lot of times it's self-defense oriented fighting. And to me, self-defense oriented fighting, you're not going to have gloves on. And the gloves make a big difference. Like I don't think people realize how big of a difference having gloves on makes when you're trying to do certain things in grappling. Like it's huge, especially like I mean, not negating the fact that your opponent's going to grab your gloves. It happens all the time. The refs don't catch it all. You try to point it out sometimes. It's already too late. They already stopped what you were trying to do. Like glove grabbing happens, but even when it doesn't happen, just getting that thick glove in through a gap, and putting it in a certain position And hitting somebody with an arm punch with a glove on, it just doesn't do the same damage, doesn't get the same reaction. And trying to get in those gaps can be really difficult. If they got their elbows tight, getting an underhook's way harder. Getting certain grips is way harder. Even hand-to-hand grips, like when you're used to doing a gable grip, if you got a glove that sticks out a quarter of an inch past your hand, you can no longer use a gable grip normally. You have to switch your grip up, which is going to cause you to get tired quicker because you're not used to doing that. So there's a lot of factors people, don't realize can have an impact on performance for athletes that aren't used to wearing gloves or that prefer not to wear gloves. The new UFC gloves are a bit better, though. I got to say, I fought last weekend in a gloved bout, and I got a pair of the new UFC gloves, the 3/8, just to check them out, and they're definitely the best gloves I've fought in so far. So I think that they're kind of going in that direction to make it more like no gloves with the UFC, and a lot of guys are complaining about them. And I noticed, like, yeah, as soon as I hit the guy, you could feel the punch through the glove, which is what I like. But I can understand why a lot of the fighters that aren't used to that don't like it.
Yeah, because I've seen, I mean, even directly with you, like I've seen some posts where you're like, going through certain past fights and stuff like that, and you were like, oh, the gloves kind of got in the way of this submission that I was working towards. Like the Vaseline kind of made the, you know, grip difficult. And I mean, obviously the Vaseline is, still present in this, but even some of the empirical evidence that I've seen, like with bare knuckle MMA, just even in like the OG, like early UFC days, like more often than not, the fights would result in submissions. So it seems like it has the multiplicity of MMA techniques in as far as like the stand-up portion, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems like it also is like something for grapplers that would be really exciting. Like it seems like there's much more like a fluidity and like an organic kind of dynamic with it, as you were even kind of touching on there.
Yeah, I do think that there is, and I think we're going to probably see. Hopefully, I mean, I'm really hoping bare knuckle MMA catches traction and catches on more and more. And I'd love to see some adjustments to the rules and scoring. I'm very vocal about that also. But I think as it builds momentum, we're going to see more grapplers get into fighting for bare knuckle MMA. I've heard Nicky Rod talking about it. Man, if he gets into bare knuckle MMA, he's going to be a killer. Like that guy's a beast. I've talked to a few of my guys about it in the future that mostly interested in grappling. But like, I don't, I think the idea of getting hit and getting cut easier kind of turns a lot of grapplers off. But yeah, the reality is like they're not going to be throwing at you as recklessly, and it's a little bit easier to be more technical. And I think a lot of grapplers like that technical kind of a fight. They get intimidated by striking because a lot of striking coaches don't know how to teach that way. But as more coaches start adapting the more technical style of teaching, where we're learning tactics through live drills and things like that, I think we're going to see more grapplers get into it, get comfortable with it, and then go into fighting without gloves. So I think that there's a big future in this for grapplers specifically. And then also strikers, you want to bust somebody up. It's a little bit, if you know how to do it properly, you can cause more inflicted damage without gloves, than you can with them. I think it's just harder to get knockouts probably, but that's not what the data is showing. If we look at the data, we're seeing more knockouts in bare knuckle boxing than we are in gloved boxing and MMA. So, it's I always like to look at the data, but it's from my experience, I think that it's easier to get submissions than it is to get knockouts. But we're seeing a lot of knockouts too, which is going to make it popular. So I'm all about it. I personally think gloves should be optional. I think that'd be the best way to have the sport. Let guys wear the gloves if they want to, but I don't think you should have to.
Yeah, and I guess it touches on your own, I guess, journey in martial arts in a certain sense. Like you were obviously involved in martial arts prior to this, but from what I understand, you were like pretty heavily into Brazilian jiu-jitsu after you'd kind of seen those old Hoist Gracie tapes when you were 18, which kind of, touches on that era. I was talking about like the real OG MMA days and stuff like that. And obviously, like a lot of times since then, like it's literally been over 3 decades since then. So there's that certain like refinement on an overall level, but still bringing it back to that gloveless kind of thing. It's sort of like that confluence of the old and the new kind of coming together, it seems like.
Yeah, it really is, and that's honestly, I mean, I had a fair amount of reasons to like need to make a change in my life and start fighting last year. But one of the biggest ones was when I saw bare knuckle MMA. It's like, all right, well that interests me, that I actually want to try. I wanted to do it, so seeing that kind of come back, because that was the one thing I always wanted to try was a Vale Tudo, fight and try my hand in that, and it was just never available. It was like illegal as soon as I found out about it. Especially in New York where I was from. I was fortunate because I had grown up doing a little bit of boxing and wrestling, and I kind of got out of it in my teenage years, and then funny enough, I got into a street fight with another kid that ended up going into the Ultimate Fighter. We're friends now, but yeah, I ended up getting thrown face first into a parking lot in a street fight and losing a street fight. And that's kind of what motivated me to start training again when I was like 16. Got back in the boxing gym, and then this guy up the road that had a martial arts gym had a cage in it, and he was doing these underground amateur fights with MMA. So he went to my boxing gym, got me into it. I did a couple of those, and then I found out about the UFC and Royce Gracie, and I thought it was kind of cool because I never learned like submission grappling, but it's definitely something I was into. And I got into submission grappling from there, and then I ended up moving into a jiu-jitsu gym shortly after that, and doing jiu-jitsu full time basically from like 2004, 2005 until probably 2010. I just did nothing but jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it seems like you really got immersed deeply into it, and just the whole journey's been cool. Like we were talking about how you'd spent like a lot of time coaching and how your competitive experience kind of belies the overall experience. Like we kind of touched on this a bit the last time we were talking, but like previously having coached guys like Jason Knight and I mean, again, sharing a spot on a card with him, that was kind of the case the last time we spoke and just yeah, cool to see. Like it's just an interesting sort of thing. I feel like both yourself and Jason have those exciting fights too, and I guess just even bringing it up speaks to your longevity in the martial arts and all that.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I mean, I get really nervous when Jason fights, and he gets nervous when I fight, but we don't get as nervous when we fight ourselves. So it's funny how that goes. It's you learn to love the people you train with, and you get more nervous for them than you do for yourself. I honestly like I experienced as a professional. I only experienced nerves in one fight. I never had any nerves before any of my fights except one earlier this year because I was coming off of a loss. And coming off the loss, it was like, all right, man, I can't let this happen again. And I got in my own head a little bit. I trained harder for that fight and I came in good shape. And the kid I fought was a good wrestler. So I was, a little bit nervous, like, well, how good is his wrestling? I knew he was a 3-time state champion and, he wrestled in college, but, I didn't know what he was going to feel like when he got a hold of me. That fight I experienced some nerves in, but for the most part, like for the bare knuckle fight, that was the best I've ever felt. And I had physically everything was wrong with me. It was crazy. My knees wouldn't bend. Like I had all this wild stuff happen that never happened to me in the fight before. I've never even seen happen before. But I was in such a good mindset that I didn't let any of it affect me that day.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I guess it just probably speaks to like the familiarity with fighting without gloves. And I mean, I guess you were even kind of talking earlier, and we were kind of touching on like how much it seems to be an ever growing thing, just the idea of bare knuckle combat in general, but specifically like bare knuckle MMA. And it's not even just what Gamebred seems to be doing. Like, obviously, they seem to be like the big show that is doing it. But I saw that there was a bare knuckle MMA fight attempt in Alaska even earlier this year. And obviously, didn't come to fruition with the opponent having some medical issues that forced them to withdraw. But just the fact that these different places are looking into, promoting bare knuckle MMA and having these historic kind of cards, I think it's really positive. It shows that, growth potential and all that.
Yeah, I'm really hoping it catches on. I was excited about that. That would have been the first bare knuckle fight in Alaskan history. So I was excited about that, but unfortunately, it didn't work out. It happened to me a few times this year. But Yeah, Gamebred is definitely putting on a great show, and I think that as it builds momentum, I think this whole sport will grow. I think we're going to see uh, other promotions get into it. I'm expecting that. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, honestly. Like, there's not another big promotion going head to head with Gamebred yet because they're getting a good amount of views. They're getting some momentum, and they got great fighters that they're attracting. I mean, this card is, I mean, it's pretty stacked. Like all their cards have had really good guys on them. So I'm sure that sometime within the next year or two, we're going to see another promotion start to go head to head with Gamebred, and then I think that's when we're going to see the real growth. Especially if it's in like Europe. I think we're going to see some more competitiveness and some, just more people hearing about it because of uh, the different levels of advertising, the different demographics that they hit. So I'm actually looking forward to when that does happen.
Yeah, and just more opportunities for fighters as well. I mean, you always love to see that part of it too.
Yeah, but I mean, even still, like I don't think UFC would be as big as it is if it wasn't for Bellator and One, and then all these other organizations popping up. I think that just adds momentum, and then one can stand out as the best, right? But if it's just one organization, getting the word out, people don't know how good it is. So I think having more organizations out there would help Gamebred, but also would help the sport tremendously.
Yeah, exactly. More chances to see this great, ever-growing sport. And I guess like one of the names on this card that I feel like has been driving a fair bit of attention. I mean, obviously a stacked card, like so many great combatants on this card that I could touch on, but it seemed like that Kevin Lee signing was really something that kind of caught people's attention, like even just the surprise factor, because I feel like at least I haven't seen him prior indicate an interest in any, I guess, permutation of bare knuckle competition, whether it's, MMA or in bare knuckle boxing. Like, did you have any kind of particular thought when you saw Kevin Lee signed onto this card and whatnot?
Yeah, I'm excited for it, man. I think this suits Kevin Lee. He's got. I mean, Kevin Lee is, I think, a very underrated fighter. He's had mixed results, but I mean, he beat, what was it, Gregor Gillespie. Like, I mean, I didn't think anybody was going to beat Gregor Gillespie. And he did that all on the feet by stopping having good enough wrestling to stop Gregor Gillespie for a little while. First of all, I think he might be the only one that could have done that. And then also having the skill to be able to land a head kick on him like that. I mean, that was a super impressive fight. And I think it kind of flew under the radar, like how impressive that victory was. And obviously Kevin Lee's had some mixed results. He's struggled with staff a couple times and whatever else. But the guy's a phenomenal fighter. He's shown it time and time again. He's great on the ground. He's great on the feet, and his wrestling is for MMA is top notch. So I'm really excited to see what he does in bare knuckle MMA, and I do think that him bringing a big fan base is going to be good for the sport for sure.
Yeah, and it just seems like such a deep heavyweight division they have. Like I was noticing and noticed this the last time we talked that you're very heavily involved in Alan Belcher MMA club, and he was just in that big title fight with Junior Dos Santos, who is now the champion. And then I mean, even on this card, you have guys like Maurice Green and Chase Sherman and Guto Inasanche. Like it just seems like they really put a lot into the heavyweight ranks. Like I mean, Frank Tate and Alex Nicholson stands out as well. So I mean, yeah, you see it in like all the divisions really, but this seems like a particularly heavyweight centric kind of card and stuff like that. In a certain sense, at least, like you can kind of see the divisional movement, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's a smart move too, because the heavyweights are going to get a lot of knockouts, and that's going to draw attention to it. And you got Junior Dos Santos is literally one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he's the champion right now. They've got to have good opposition for him. I thought Allen did really well in that fight. It's not many guys turn Junior into a grappler, and uh, now that Allen's going to work his way back into that fight, you've got the guys like Guto, obviously Chase, Alex Nicholson, just killer knockout artists. They're all finishers. That's going to make that division site exciting to watch. We got just finishers after finishers. So I'm really excited about what they're doing with the heavyweight division for sure, and I'm looking forward to like not only to this card as an athlete and as a coach, but also as a fan. There's some really good fights in this card.
And I guess part of the reason why I brought that up is because it seems like Gamebred is kind of transitioning into like a space where they're either outright cementing champions or they're engaging in like some sort of like title eliminator bouts and things of that persuasion. So I guess like in asking that, like how much is your pursuit in bare knuckle MMA oriented to like at one point cementing yourself as a champion within it? Like, is your pursuit kind of like a fight to fight basis, test yourself as a martial artist sort of thing? Is there like a broader, I guess, capstone achievement idea of capturing a belt within Gamebred Bare Knuckle MMA? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not something I'd ever really put much thought into because, by 38 years old, I hadn't even had a pro fight yet. It didn't seem like it was something that was in the cards for me. So it was never something I attached to myself. I thought about doing a couple fights still, but as I got older and older, it just seemed like I would do less and less. But I also didn't anticipate bare knuckle MMA becoming a thing. And, that's something that my skill set is most suited for without having to make as many adjustments. So yeah, I think especially at the 145 division, as opportunities open up, I would like to see I stack up against those guys. I haven't really fought anyone at that level yet. So I need to see how many. All my fights have been mostly 1 round fights. I haven't fought 3 rounds yet. I haven't fought 5 rounds for sure. So I want to get those fights where I can get into a war And I think Zellner is going to be a good test for me. I think this is a guy I expect to go more than one round with, and I expect this fight to make me push myself. And I want to come in as best shape as I can and see how I thrive under those conditions, and then move on from there. Because there's definitely guys in division that I can eye myself moving up against that I think are probably in that picture. But I'm not so arrogant as to say that I'm going to win the title when I've never had a 3-round fight before. So I've been fortunate enough to finish the majority of my opponents, uh, but I haven't fought a guy like Sean Soriano, or anyone like that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of predicated on getting in those competitive experiences, as you just kind of said there. I think it's just kind of predicated on how some of these fights end up playing out. I guess like the obvious question I would have after you said that, like, and this might even be a nebulous question to try to answer, I guess, but do you see David Zelner as the kind of opponent where you can get a bit deeper into that fight to kind of get that, I guess, competitive familiarity of getting into the deeper rounds? Or do you not really like visualize fights playing out in a particular way in that kind of sense, I guess?
No, I always visualize. I'm a strategist, and sometimes it works against me because not everything goes according to even Plan D sometimes. But I do think that Zellner is going to be able um, to draw more out of me for sure. He's already shown he's really tough. He can take a beating and keep coming forward. He can deliver a beating. He's good on the ground. He's got slick jiu-jitsu. He's comfortable striking. He's comfortable in all ranges of the fight. And he's coming in shape. He's had 3-round wars before, so I have a lot of respect for him. And I expect this fight to be my toughest one I've ever had.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for sure, man. And I appreciate you making the time to come on and give some great insights, Mike. But I do want to be mindful of your busy schedule. It seems like you have a lot on the go. So I guess in saying that, I figured I'd give you the floor. If there was like a final parting thought you wanted to add as we're wrapping up here, I do appreciate you making some time to talk today, man.
No, yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's great. I'm here with the team now, training pretty hard. So I've got Brandon Davis, he's fighting for the title. Jason Knight's on the card also. Chase Sherman usually comes into town for a few weeks. He's mostly living in Florida now, but he came up over here with us. And then Alan's running classes and training for us. So we got a really strong group of guys here. Tyler Hill's on there also, and we're all putting the work in right now, getting ready for this thing. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. One of my black belts, he runs a page called Shivworks. He's a South North on Instagram. He's a guy to follow. He's a self defense guy, but he's one of my black belts. He's like my self defense black belt, and he does seminars all around the world. Self defense training with like weapons involved and for LEOs and things like that. And I work a lot with him on the bare knuckle stuff and application. And he's been really really helpful to me with that. So I'm excited to show some of the stuff that I worked with him and see how that plays out in the bare knuckle realm with no gloves on. Things we don't see as often.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. I mean, I'm excited for your David Zelner fight, but such a deep card overall. I feel like Gamebred Bare Knuckle MMA always brings it, and I'll certainly be tuning in on November 15th to see what's going on. But to reiterate, Mike, thanks for coming on Bare Knuckle Bowker, and yeah, have a good rest of your day, man. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, man. Talk to you soon.